In 1830, a diplomatic squabble over a fan, of all things, spiraled out of control. France, citing an insult to its consul, launched an invasion of Algiers. This wasn't just a military expedition, it was the beginning of 132 years of French rule over Algeria, a period that would radically reshape the land and its people, leaving a legacy that is both deeply impressive and profoundly tragic. The official story was one of a civilizing mission. France promised to bring progress, enlightenment, and modernity to a supposedly backward land. And to be fair, if you looked at the surface, you could almost believe it. The French weren't just soldiers, they were engineers, architects, and city planners. They arrived with blueprints and grand visions, ready to transform Algeria into a jewel of their overseas empire. Let's start with the cities. Algiers, Oran, Constantine, these ancient cities were reimagined. The French tore down old, labyrinthine quarters to make way for wide, tree-lined boulevards, modeled directly after Haussmann's Paris. They built magnificent administrative buildings, grand opera houses, and elegant European-style apartments. Just look at the Grande Poste, the main post office in Algiers. It's a stunning example of French Moorish revival architecture, a symbol of French power and permanence. New ports were dredged, connecting Algeria to the global economy like never before. An extensive network of railways and roads was laid out, crisscrossing the country, making it easier to transport goods, troops, and, most importantly, settlers. Agriculture was also revolutionized. French colonists, known as pieds noirs, or Blackfeet, drained swamps and cleared land, turning vast tracts of what they considered wasteland into some of the most productive agricultural land in the Mediterranean. They introduced modern farming techniques and machinery. Vineyards flourished, producing wine for export to France. Algeria became a major producer of wheat, citrus fruits, and olives. On paper, the colony was an economic success story, a testament to French ingenuity. But this grand project of rebuilding had a dark, hidden cost, paid almost entirely by the native Algerian population. This wasn't a partnership, it was a conquest. The land that the French settlers developed was, in most cases, confiscated from Algerian communities. Traditional communal land ownership was dismantled and replaced with private property laws that favored Europeans. Millions of acres were seized, pushing Algerians off their ancestral lands and into less fertile regions or the crowded kasbahs of the cities. The so-called civilizing mission was steeped in a deep-seated racism. The indigenous Muslim and Jewish populations were not made French citizens. Instead, they were designated as subjects. They were governed by a separate, discriminatory legal system known as the Code de l'Indigène, or the Native Code. This system gave colonial administrators sweeping powers to punish Algerians without trial for a long list of minor offenses, things as simple as speaking disrespectfully to a European or traveling without a permit. It was a system designed to enforce submission and control. Education, often touted as a tool of progress, was another instrument of colonial policy. While the French built schools, access for Algerians was severely limited. The curriculum was designed to assimilate, to create a small, French-speaking elite loyal to the colonial administration, while the vast majority were left with little to no formal education. The goal wasn't to empower the Algerian people, but to create a subservient workforce. The French language was promoted at the expense of Arabic and Tamazight, further alienating Algerians from their own culture and heritage. The economic boom was also a one-sided affair. The wealth generated from Algeria's farms and mines flowed overwhelmingly back to France and into the pockets of the European settlers. While the pieds noirs enjoyed a standard of living comparable to that in mainland France, the majority of the Algerian population lived in poverty, suffering from malnutrition and disease. The modern infrastructure, the railways and roads, were primarily built to serve the colonial economy and military, connecting settler farms to coastal ports, often bypassing Algerian villages entirely. This system of segregation and exploitation was not subtle. In the cities, you had the European quarters with their grand avenues and modern amenities. and right next to them, the old Kasbahs, where the Algerian population was crowded into increasingly dire conditions. It was a visual representation of the colonial hierarchy, two separate worlds, one of master and one of subject, existing side by side but worlds apart. Resistance to French rule was a constant feature from the very beginning. From the early guerrilla warfare led by Emir Abdelkader to the political movements of the 20th century, Algerians never accepted their subjugation. The French response was often brutal, with massacres, collective punishments, and the destruction of entire villages. The beautiful facade of colonial Algeria was built on a foundation of violence and sustained by relentless oppression. As the years went on, the promises of the civilizing mission rang increasingly hollow. The system had created a deep and unbridgeable divide. On one side, a privileged European minority who considered Algeria their home, and on the other, an indigenous majority stripped of their land, their rights, and their dignity. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in 1954. Igniting the Algerian War of Independence, one of the most brutal decolonization conflicts of the 20th century. For 8 years, the country was torn apart by a war that saw widespread torture, terrorism, and horrific violence on both sides. When it finally ended in 1962 with Algerian independence, it marked the end of 132 years of French rule. The legacy of this era is incredibly complex. Today, you can still walk through the streets of Algiers and admire the beautiful French architecture. You can see the remnants of the infrastructure that France built. But you can't separate these physical structures from the system of oppression they represented. The story of French Algeria is a powerful reminder that progress and development can look very different depending on your perspective. For the colonizer, it was about building an empire. For the colonized, it was a long, painful struggle for survival, freedom, and the right to define their own destiny. Understanding this dual legacy, the creation and the oppression, the beauty and the brutality, is crucial to understanding not just the history of Algeria, but the complex and often painful relationship between Europe and the wider world that continues to shape our present. Thanks for watching. If you found this history interesting, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complexities of our shared past. See you next time.